Welcome to another episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know. Now, today we are going to get to know Jan Nicholls. She is an incredible woman and she has had a lifetime of loving, celebrating and enjoying and promoting and championing kids' books. She is the WA President of the Children's Book Council of Australia. She used to be a teacher librarian. She's only just recently retired. And wait till you see her bookcase behind her. Take a note of the bookcase because it's full of kids' books. Now, what makes someone love kids' books so much? Let's find out. Let's get to know Jan Nicholls. Jan Nicholls, welcome to my little chat show. How are you going?
I'm very well, thanks, Josh. Thanks for the invitation.
That's all right. Now, look, in the introduction, I mentioned about who you are and what you do, and that you're the current president of the Children's Book Council of Australia WA branch. And that's a pretty big role. And that you are such a passionate advocate for children's books, whether it's WA, whether it's Australia, whether it's worldwide. And I'm just looking at your bookcase behind you, and I'm guessing that's full of children's books?
It sure is. The majority of them behind me are West Australian children's books. There's some from adult writers as well. But I've rearranged my bookshelves just recently because Writing WA invited me to participate in their Love to Read local campaign. And you were supposed to, well, you weren't supposed to, you could choose what you focused on. And rather than just cherry pick one book or one or two books, I decided to showcase the whole lot. And I was quite surprised myself when I saw the extent of my collection. Yeah.
Have you actually have you dared count them?
No, haven't counted them. And despite my librarian background, nor are they arranged alphabetically or even by colour.
I don't know how people can do it by colour. Anyway, but now that's a beautiful segue. You mentioned your librarian background. How do you, this is because the idea of this show is to get to know the person behind what they do. So how did you become so passionate about children's books?
I was thinking about this the other day. I think it started with my mum and dad, because my mum used to read The Water Babies to me as a bedtime story. And I have a couple of copies.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful editions, a really old first edition and a more modern one that Norman bought me as a birthday gift with lovely illustrations and color plates and things.
Wow.
And I think I really loved it because my dad's name was Tom. And even though I have no memory of this, because I would only have been 2 or 3 years old, apparently I used to make my mum read me this story every night at bedtime. And there's a part where Tom, the chimney sweep, falls down the chimney and into the water and is sort of swept away. And I used to say, poor Tom, and burst into tears. I mean, in hindsight, it's not a children's book at all, and it's certainly not suitable as a bedtime story. And going back and trying to read it now, it's almost impenetrable, for modern day readers. But apparently,
is that the book that was turned into a movie? Because I think I remember watching something when I was a kid, and it was half live action and half animation. I think when Tom fell into the water, it turned into animation, didn't it?
That's right. Yes, he did. And he interacts with all the fish and everything. And he's not the most pleasant of characters. And he meets people along the way like Mrs. Do As You Would Be Done By, which, sparked a love of words. Anyway, that was I don't know if it's correct to say it's a memory, because as I say, I don't know that I remember it, but it was part of family folklore that I used to make my mum read this story every night until I cried, and then I would go to sleep.
Wow.
But my dad, Tom, used to buy me a book every Saturday morning. I was brought up in the northeast of England, a Scottish mother and a Northumbrian father. And on a Saturday, the tradition was that you had high tea in the afternoon. So you had brown bread, which we thought was very posh at the time, and cream cakes from the local bakery. And it was a Saturday morning ritual that Dad and I would walk down into the town to the bakery. And there was a little, I think it was probably a second-hand bookshop nearby, and he would buy me a book every Saturday morning when we went to the baker to buy the brown bread and the cream cakes. And I remember some beautiful books over the years. And one of my biggest regrets in life is that I didn't keep them.
Oh,
So I didn't keep
yeah.
them as I grew into adulthood, and then didn't bring them with me when I moved to Australia. And I have tried since to relocate a couple online, and yeah, not had much success. But anyway, then we graduated from the bookshop to Dad taking me to the local public library. And
Mm.
I don't remember Mum being a reader so much, but my dad certainly was, and he had a penchant for westerns. But he used to commit the cardinal sin, in my view, of folding the pages over to mark his place.
Oh,
That's
I
something
do that
I
too
can't bring
sometimes,
myself to
Jan.
do. So anyway, he
But
used to
how, but
take me
I'm
to
going
the,
to interrupt you there. How
yeah,
encouraging of your father to look at reading and books and literature as such a focal point as you as a young child. I mean, it could have been anything else, but for reading, that is really something quite admirable for your father to do.
yes. Now, he was a terrific role model. And as I say, so he took me to the local public library, and I was able to borrow things on his card. And I remember when I was old enough to get a card of my own, and used to get these little green sort of cardboard pockets. And you had
I know the
four
ones.
of those to borrow non-fiction books. And then you got these cardboard brown rectangles that looked like little bars of chocolate, and you had six of those, and you're allowed to get fiction books with those.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was, I remember the delight of being able to choose my own books in the library, and used to come home with an armload every weekend. And then in primary school, I had a teacher who was just a fabulous influence. Her name was Mrs. Hogg. And
Mm.
um, in primary school, when I was about 11 or 12, she used to read a book aloud to the class after lunch every afternoon. So she introduced me to Narnia, with The Lion, the
Oh,
Witch, and the Wardrobe, and books like The Silver Sword by Ian Seralia, The Wheel on the School, which had a character in it called Jan.
oh,
It was a man. It was a
oh.
male character. That didn't matter. Still called Jan. So a book with my name in it, and that, that was a fabulous introduction to books. So by then I was just an avid reader. I could never get enough of books, and so falling into teaching and librarianship was kind of a natural progression.
Mm.
And one of the best things about being a librarian, especially in a school environment, which is where I worked for nearly 30 years, is that you can inspire that spark in young people, and you can feed their reading passion, ignite and feed their reading passion. And I used to love developing the fiction collection in particular, and was one of these librarians who couldn't read every single book necessarily that you put in the collection, but gave it a
Mm.
red hot try. Yes.
So
And
that
then
it would have taken a long time to read all these books, though, everything that you put into the library.
um, yes and no. I mean, it wasn't a chore. It's a
Mm.
passion. So I love reading. I don't speed read, but I can read pretty quickly.
Mm.
Um,
So
and I
you
think
were a
it's so
librarian
important to know
in,
your.
so you were a school librarian in England. You started there, didn't you?
I started off in England. I started off as a classroom teacher, but was given responsibility for the library. They didn't have a librarian. They didn't have a teacher librarian role as such in the same way as we do in Australia. But the middle school that I worked at in Yorkshire had little individual libraries in each classroom. And then
Mm.
the principal decided that it would be better if they were managed from a central location. So he allocated a bit of space, a bit of an open area, and then needed someone to be in charge of that. And I was given that job.
Ah, so then it all really changed from there, I guess.
Yes, that all grew from there. Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So when did you come out to Australia?
1982, on a year's working holiday with a girlfriend.
Wow. And then what made you stay? What made you come out here? I
Oh
mean, what made
man.
you just keep going?
Oh well, we really enjoyed it when we first arrived. I loved the lifestyle. I loved the big sky. I loved the climate. I loved everything about the country, and still do. So yeah, so I decided to stay, and the girlfriend went home. We still keep in touch. She lives in Bristol now, and
Mm.
um, and I've stayed here and never regretted it for a second.
Wow. So you are now retired, aren't you?
Sort of, yes. I'm retired, but I do casual relief work for a local public library. Yes.
Ah, okay. Okay, okay. So you still can't get that library thing out of your blood, can you?
No, no, it's hard. It's a hard thing to give up. Yeah, that connection with books.
Yeah, exactly. Now, look, you champion kids' books till the ends of the earth through the Children's Book Council of Australia and through your own just personal challenges, channels and stuff like that. So you see literally every style of kids' book there is. You've seen it evolve over the last 30 odd years. I'm going to ask you a tricky question. Is there anything missing in children's literature at the moment? Is there a gap in the market? Is there something that's not been recognized? Or you think it's pretty much suited the way things are?
Well, we haven't had any werewolves or vampires for a while, but that's just me being facetious. No, I honestly think that in Australian children's literature, we punch way above our weight internationally. And one of the things that might be missing is that international recognition.
Ah.
You
How
know,
does that
worldwide
change?
recognition, international sales. Well, I think through organisations like the Children's Book Council of Australia and IBI, the International Board for Books on Young People, you know, you can nominate practitioners from your country for international awards. And we have had a couple of notable successes over the years, people like Sonia Harknett and Sean Tan, for example. By promoting the Australian Children's Laureates, Ursula de Wazowski is the current laureate, and she took over from Lee Hobbs, from Morris Gleitzman, sorry, and Lee Hobbs has been ambassador, and Alison Lester and Buri Pryor, and they have now joined the international community where there are children's laureates in other countries. So it's like everything in life, it's a constant challenge to educate and raise awareness and just keep putting yourself out there and reminding yourself that you're as good as anyone else in the world.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that international recognition, look, it is important for raising our profile, but I suppose as long as we're targeting and we're nurturing Australian kids with Australian talent and Australian authors and Australian stories, I think that's very vital and that's really, really important. So obviously you see that as a strength at the moment. That's what we're doing, getting Australian stories to Australian kids.
Yes, yeah. And you know, it's an old cliche, isn't it? The kids like to see themselves reflected in books, but I think that's true. And Australia is always evolving as a country. We're becoming increasingly multicultural, and of course, the pandemic has thrown a new perspective on life. So I'm sure there'll be all sorts of pandemic-related stories emerging soon.
I'm not going to write one. It's all right.
Let's hope they're not grim and dire. I mean, you know, we've had a few dystopian tales over the years, and it's been interesting to read those in the light of what's happening, you know, with isolation and lockdown. So it'll be interesting to see what emerges. I hope it's going to be positive and uplifting and offer solutions rather than just be grim and depressing.
I think you're right. I read somewhere a couple of weeks ago that there was the call for young adult fiction that dystopian genre to actually shift to end up being a bit more positive. So after the pandemic, after it's all over or whatever, we could be reading a bit more stories about hope and a bit more positive stories that actually lift us up, as opposed to reinforcing this whole grim tale type of thing. So I'm hoping that too, and I'm really hoping that we get a few more positive stories. Now, I want to ask you a question. Now, a lot of children's authors get asked this question left, right, and center. I get asked it all the time. And I know you would get asked it, like you're at a dinner party and someone comes up to you and goes, I've got a great idea for a kid's book. What do you think I should do? Now, what do you say to them? You can be honest.
That is such a great question. I agree, Josh. You must hear it all the time. If I had $1 for every time I asked that question, I could fully retire very, very comfortably. First of all, the popular misconception is that Children's Book Council of Australia is all about helping people write their books and get them published, whereas it's not. So if I can just clear that up first before answering your question. So what CBCA is about is promoting already published Australian children's literature, highlighting the cream of the crop, the best of the best. And we do that in 3 ways: through the announcement of a notables list at the end of February, which is the best of the books that have been published in the previous year in 5 different categories. And then a shortlist is announced at the end of March with 6 books in each of those categories. And then in August, when we have the big traditional Children's Book Council Book Week celebrations, the Book of the Year award winners are announced, and a very nice cash prize.
Oh, is there? I'm going to put my books in there.
Is given to the winning authors and illustrators. So the Children's Book Council of Australia is about promoting the creators of already published books and highlighting what's brilliant about them and supporting them in that way. So if someone asks me what they should do about getting their own book published, I tell them, first of all, they should go to the public library or their local specialist independent bookshop, to the children's section there, and have a good look at what's there. And note how high the quality is. Note the production values of the book, you know, how fabulous it looks, how great it is to hold it in your hand, how exquisite the illustrations are, how well they work with the text. Have a look at some of the stuff, have a look at some of the classics over the years that have won awards and are still in print 20, 30 years later, and see how your book measures up to that. And then I recommend that they join Scribby, which, for your listeners, they're probably aware of it, but that stands for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And there's a really dynamic chapter here in WA.
Oh, they're fantastic. Yeah.
And they are such a congenial, helpful, friendly, positive bunch. And they are the ones to offer practical help and advice. So I'd recommend that you get in touch with them and join them.
Now, that's a very good answer, very diplomatic answer. I usually say something a little bit more concise, which is, have you written your story? And they go, a bit of it. And I go, well, why don't you finish writing it and then address where you're going to get it published and how you're going to get it published? Because I think people see kids' books and they go, oh, there's only 5 words to a page. There's a picture. They look so deceptively simple to write. And when you actually sit down and you even talk to someone who's written a kid's book and they explain to you the nuances, how every word is hand-picked, hand-chosen and edited to death. And then the illustrator and how the illustrations have to, whether they're marrying up with the text, whether they're supporting the text, whether they're metaphorical, whatever they're doing, it's a science literally behind writing a kid's book. But they look deceptively simple and everyone goes, oh, I could write a kid's book.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the most popular misconception. The other question I'm often asked is, when are you going to write a book? As if somehow all these wonderful books that I've read, I'm somehow going to soak up by osmosis and then churn one out of my own, you know, or it's just going to emerge naturally, if only. So my answer to that is, I'm an appreciator and a promoter of books. And just when I think there can't possibly be any new ideas or anything new to say, a book comes along and knocks my socks off, you know, and turns my thinking around, and you have that wow moment and think, oh, and then I think, oh boy, I could never have thought of that in a million years, you know. So
and even though everyone has their role to play. You know, there's the people that write the books, the people that champion the books, the people that publish the books, and they all fit in to make the whole system work.
Yes. So I am a member of the Scribby branch here, but I'm very much an observer on the sidelines. And as you say, I prefer to be a champion of the books and promote what all our wonderful creative folks here are doing. And I'm just in awe of their talent. And so many new ones emerging all the time.
Oh, exactly. And it's people like you that are championing them, that are lifting them up and going, okay, let's highlight this person, let's highlight that person, let's see what we can do. So I'm going to ask you, this is a challenging question, okay?
Right.
Now, if you could be arts minister and you could be education minister at the same time, and you had your hands on the purse strings and you could dip your hand in and get as much money as you wanted, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Ooh, oh, to have that power, wouldn't it be wonderful? Well, I would reverse the decision to incorporate or subsume the Department for the Arts into some other department like infrastructure or transport or local
Yes.
government or, whatever. And I would give it independent status of its own and an unlimited budget.
I
And
like that idea.
and I would be offering regular funding to all of the arts bodies, the theatres, the dance companies, literature groups, everyone. And I would suggest investigating giving a basic minimum wage to all creators, enough so that they can pay the bills and take care of their daily expenses, so that they can then create. Because if you think of the impact that the arts has had in our lives generally, but especially during this pandemic, it's been the soul food that's nurtured everyone.
Mm.
And the other thing that I would do is I would have a dedicated section on the TV news every night to the arts. It's just as important as sport, for example. No sport's being played at the moment, but all this bleating is going on the news every night about, oh, when will it happen again? I understand sport is important. I like sport as much as the next person, but the arts are equally important,
Yeah.
and they ought to have the same sort of publicity.
I look, I'm voting you in. Vote one Jan Nicholls. That's all I say. But it is so true. The idea of a minimum wage for an artist, even just for a short period of time or something, like what we're going through at the moment. My sideline business, which is a copywriting business, that's basically died for a while now. And it's like, my income, where's that gone? And of course, you're too busy worrying about money, so you cannot get into that creative headspace where you can actually feel comfortable to be able to create. But the JobKeeper program, which I was able to luckily get for my business, has given that space to go, I don't need to be as anxious as before. I can, okay, what can I do? What can I create? What other avenues can I look at? So created a YouTube kids channel. I've created this talk show. I've created so many other things because it's allowed the space for that to happen, and the benefits that just flow onto everyone else from there. And so I think that's a really great idea. And I think hopefully we will look at that as a country after this is all over.
Yes. I know in terms of funding, the Children's Book Council of Australia, the WA branch, we've run a Book Week program for 40 odd years now, where we apply for funding from the department, and we disperse it to public libraries around the state. So not just the metro area, but all the regions as well. And that enables them to run programs in Book Week or as close to Book Week as they can. And they can invite creators, so they can pay for authors and illustrators to go and visit, and they can invite school children or local families to come to the libraries and participate in Book Week programs. So that's been running, as I say, for a long time. But this year, the funding has been severely impacted by this pandemic. So we are still going ahead with Book Week, but it's in the new at the new time of October. Traditionally, it's always in the third week in August, but this year it's been moved to October, from October the 17th to the 23rd.
Oh, okay. Are you still expecting, are you hoping that people can still go to school? I mean, outsiders can still, like authors can visit schools and stuff by then, do you think?
It's too early to say at this stage. I'm not sure how the social restrictions will go by then, but certainly we're hoping to run some Book Week programs and to still have some events available, whether they'll be in the traditional format where an author or illustrator could go to a school or a public library, or whether it will be something like this, like a Zoom meeting or some sort of online forum. We'll probably have to come up with something more creative, but for sure, Book Week celebrations will still go ahead,
so
but they will be moved to October.
So the kids can still dress up, and the parents can still get anxious about, oh my God, how am I going to dress up as Harry Potter? I've got to make a hat again. What's going to happen?
Absolutely. But it's much easier this year because the Book Week theme is Curious Creatures, Wild Minds. And so
you can
pick out all the animal costumes, and you can be, something creative in that field. So you don't have to go hiring costumes, and you don't have to spend all night making something. It's pretty easy. And we're hoping, it's not confirmed yet, but we're hoping that we might be able to hold our book week dinner this year at Perth Zoo.
Oh, that would be a fantastic
So
setting.
that would tie in well with the theme. So
Yeah, no,
I'm
exactly.
probably not supposed to say that because it's still under negotiation, but I've said it, so there you go.
Well, fingers crossed for that, because I'm hoping that obviously restrictions will be a little bit looser by then, and then because I know for a lot of authors and illustrators, it's a big book week is a big part of their yearly income because they get books and all that sort of stuff. So I'm crossing my fingers for every single children's author and illustrator out there that can do that, and the schools are going, right, we've still got budgets, let's book, let's do all that. Let's get people in, because I think the kids get so much out of it, and then having that live interaction with an author. Go, oh my God, there's the author! Wow, that sort of thing. So fingers crossed for that. See how things go.
I think having that interaction with an author or illustrator has such a ripple effect. It's like throwing a pebble into a pond, and the effect is felt long after the visit. So I know in a lot of schools, or a lot of feedback from schools has been how wonderful the author or illustrator visit was, because certain children who hadn't really engaged with anything up until then suddenly found a spark ignited in them on the day of that visit. And that shows up months and even years down the track in their learning. So it's such an important part of our program that I really hope we can do whatever we can to support authors and illustrators and get them out into the community somehow.
Now, Jan, I'm gonna wrap it up here with one last question. I ask every single guest this question, and this is: what is the most important thing that people should remember about life, or that they should focus on? What's the most important thing?
Oh, as soon as you ask that, millions of cliches spring to mind. But if I go back to the water babies and Mrs. Do as you would be done by, I think that's not a bad way to live your life. So treat other people the way you would like to be treated yourself, and be kind. And the other important thing I'd say is that you need to realize, or the sooner the better you realize, that happiness is a choice, and that no one else is responsible for the way you feel. You'll be a much happier person. But I think the basic philosophy is just be kind to yourself and to everyone else.
Yep. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Jan Nicholls, thank you very much for spending time with me.
Pleasure. My pleasure, Josh. Thanks for asking.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for watching the latest episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know. If you want to watch more videos, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, follow me on Facebook and Instagram. All the links are on my website, joshlangley.com.au, and that's where you can also get my books for kids to help them make themselves feel good about who they are. I'm about helping kids make friends with themselves, because that's what we all should be doing. And when we make friends with ourselves, we'll hopefully make friends with everyone else, and the world's a much better place. Thank you very much for watching.